They're multiplying. Well, this.
Good evening. We are now streaming live on YouTube. This is session 4 of Jewish Dilemmas. Last time, what did we talk about last time? Faith and doubt. And this time we're talking about peoplehood and religion. So what's the dilemma between peoplehood and religion? We see faith and doubt might be opposites of each other. Tradition and innovation seem to be opposites of each other. But peoplehood and religion cuts to the core of what is different between Jews about how Jews understand what it means to be Jewish. I'll say that again. There are differences between Jews about what it means to be Jewish. Not just how do I practice Judaism. You know, I say the Shema with this accent, you say the Shema with that accent. Obviously, I'm right and you're wrong, and therefore you're going to hell. We don't have schisms like that in Judaism. There just aren't enough of us. We have to make compromises so that theologically you can get all different kinds of things under one tent. It takes a bookbinder sometimes to put together all of the different theologies of Reform Judaism into one prayer book, for example. But what does it mean to be Jewish? What I want to look at tonight is the fundamental difference between understanding Judaism as a peoplehood and understanding Judaism as a religion. But I'll confess at the beginning, I don't have the answer. I have my answer, but it may not be the same as your answer, and that's fine. And the difference between being part of a peoplehood and being part of a religion isn't binary. You can be both a people and a religion. So we start with this question of what makes someone Jewish? What makes someone Jewish? Greer, what makes you Jewish?
The obvious thing is I converted to Judaism. I chose a belief system that works for me, and everything. It's not just that I go to temple and everything. It's that I know how to make matzo ball soup, and I know how to do all of how to cook Jewishly, which, let me tell you, was a real challenge when I first converted.
That wasn't required to pass the Intro to Judaism
No,
test.
it wasn't.
No, I'm thinking about redoing the requirements.
But it's how I live. It's how I think about things.
So you have a Jewish worldview, and you have official documentation from a Beit Din that says, I am Jewish. All right, Sherry Spitzer, what makes you Jewish? Your mother makes you Jewish. That is the standard answer. So I intentionally picked two people who came to Judaism in two different ways. Greer had a Jewish soul that she needed a stamp of approval. Sherry Spitzer had a Jewish soul that came with the placenta. And she learned how to make matzo ball soup in utero. When we think about being Jewish, some people think of a faith. Some people think of a people. Some people think of a culture. Some people think of Jewish identity as just a cloak that you put on and then take off when you're not doing Jewish. For some people, it is, as Greer described, it's a lens through which you see the Jewish world. So consider this: is Judaism a religion, a people, or is it something more? And of course, the answer is something more. Otherwise, I would just stop the lesson right there. So let's look at a biblical foundation for Jewish peoplehood and Jewish religion. It's appropriate that we look at this week because this is the call. The call to Avram in Genesis 12, this week's Torah portion, is Vayomer Adonai el Avram, Lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladetecha u'mibeit avicha el ha'aretz asher ar'eka, ve'escha legoy gadol va'avarechecha va'agadla shemecha va'ayeh bracha. God said to Avram, go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. According to the first instance, the first call to what would become the Israelites, the Jewish people, the Hebrews, the first call to Avram is to become a goy. The Hebrew word goy means nation. The Yiddish pejorative term goyim just means everybody else. We Jews are very good at dividing the world in two, us and everybody else. The us is 0.00 something percent, and the other 99 point something, that's everybody else. But to be a nation in biblical terms is different than how we understand a nation state today. But at first, what would become Judaism is a goy. It is a nation. But it is to be more than just a nation. It is, as we read in Exodus 19, to be a holy nation. Ve'atem tihiyu li mamlechet kohanim ve'goy kadosh. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. To be a nation like all the other nations, but to be distinct. Doesn't mean that we're better than anybody else. It means that we choose something different. We accept upon ourselves expectations that we don't ask of the rest of the world. But we are fully a part of the rest of the world, as we see in, for example, the prophet Isaiah, who, referring to the temple, says, Ki veiti beit tefillah yikareh lechol ha'amim. My house, God's temple, shall be called a house of prayer for all amim, for all peoples. Being a goy and an am, being a nation and a people, can be separate things. In the case of the Jewish people, we are at once a nation, an ancient nation, and a universal people. So Israel, the children of Israel, standing at Mount Sinai, receiving the law, receiving the Torah, are a holy nation. This is in Exodus 19. This is right before the giving of the Ten Commandments. Judaism's core covenant is national. It is not confessional. I'll say that again. Judaism's core covenant is national and not confessional. It is like our Pledge of Allegiance, where we don't just pray something. Everybody says the same Pledge of Allegiance, and you're not pledging allegiance to a person or even to a deity in this case. You're pledging allegiance to the covenant of peoplehood. When we pledge allegiance to the flag, the most important part of that is to the republic for Richard Sands. You know Richard Sands? To the republic for which it stands. It represents something. This covenant of the Jewish people, of the Jewish nation, is collectively entered. It's not one person saying, well, I believe this part of it, and I believe, no, you're everybody accepting the same covenant. So holiness in this sense is collective, and there are responsibilities that come with being a people. And it's not easy to be part of a people. It's not easy to be part of a people, especially when this people expects certain things of itself. Peoplehood in this sense is defined not by privilege, but by purpose. There is a purpose in being part of this covenantal nation that is belonging that goes beyond the accident of birth. You can become Jewish. You can't unbecome Jewish. There's no renouncing your Jewish citizenship. You can practice another religion and believe another tradition, but you're still part of that people. So let's take the most successful American in history. I think who is the most successful, if you're thinking of influence, what American has had more influence than any other American in US history, and this person is living today? And it's not who you're thinking. Who has more influence than any other American? Until May, nobody had heard of him. The Pope. Pope Leo XIV has more influence than any other American in history. He's the first American Pope, which says something about the state of our country today. As Rabbi Spitzer and I had lunch yesterday with the bishop, said, Eich naflu hagiborim, how the mighty have fallen, that the United States now merits having a Pope. It means we're not a superpower. But he is the Pope of more than 1 billion Catholics. Is he American?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's from Chicago. But what else is he? Yes, he's Peruvian. He has citizenship in another country. He is the head of state of the Vatican, but he's still an American. Let's think other examples of Americans who have done very well. Golda Meir. Golda Meir didn't have quite the influence that the Pope does. The Pope did, and smoked a little bit more. But Golda Meir was born in Russia, but ethnically Jewish and culturally American. Not just American, from Milwaukee. This is an American. Nobody knew kosher cheese like Golda Meir.
Yeah, that's right.
But she's part of the Jewish people. The Pope is the head of the Catholic Church, part of the American nation and the American people and something else. And to be Jewish is to be part of multiple identities all at once, including the complexities of Jewish identity. You can become Peruvian and still be American. You can become Pope, but not if you're Jewish. Early rabbis internalized Isaiah's message of universalism, of God's house being a house of prayer for all peoples. Early rabbis internalized this message, meaning that righteousness is more important than lineage, that being part of a people is not solely dependent on how you are born. And we see this in Exodus as well. The commandment within the Torah itself, you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, which is anti-hierarchical, because the priesthood is not something that's open to everybody. It's hereditary. So being part of this people means accepting certain responsibilities and expectations and keeping this covenant. It's up to everybody. So there's biblical reason for thinking of Judaism as a people, and it's a family. We just look at the names. Who was Israel? Jacob. Jacob becomes Israel. The word Jewish comes from Judah, Judea, who was one of Jacob's children, and has the territorial allotment of what includes Jerusalem. So, are we a religion? Are we a people? Yes. And we're something more. I want to fast forward to recent memory. Judaism as a civilization, which we might take for granted now because Mordecai Kaplan was so well known. He lived for over a century. Mordecai Kaplan never really left the conservative stream of Judaism. He is considered the ideological founder of Reconstructionist Judaism. But he was Mordecai Kaplan described Judaism as the evolving religious civilization of the Jewish people. The evolving religious civilization of the Jewish people. And there's a lot in that sentence. We're a religion, we're a civilization, we're a people, and it is evolving. Meaning the Jewish religion that was practiced in the tabernacle in the wilderness and in the temple in Jerusalem is different than the religious practices of Judaism today. They're both Jewish, but they're very different from each other. And that evolving religious civilization adapts to changing historical realities and geographies. This is part of the genius of how Judaism has managed to survive over millennia, is we don't shapeshift, but we figure out what is essential, what is the core, and what can be, what's the kernel and what's the husks, so that we can get rid of the husks that are not appropriate at any given time and maintain the essence of Judaism. It's how we manage to survive oppression and exile. Kaplan was responding in 1934 when he wrote Judaism as a Civilization. Think of 1934, this is before the Holocaust. Kaplan was responding to American Jewish assimilation. He wanted to integrate all of the components of civilization and peoplehood that religion alone does not address. In the 1930s, this is after the great influx of Eastern European Jews to the United States. The big influx was between 1881 and 1921. Just by show of hands, how many of your relatives came to this country between 1881 and 1921? And it wasn't just because we were drawn to this land where the streets were paved with gold. There were pogroms and things that were forcing the Russian Revolution, other things that forced us out. But integrating language, art, ethics, land, and ritual. Language, art, ethics, land, and ritual is part of a Jewish peoplehood that could be attractive to an immigrant population and a native population who might not be attracted only to the religious aspects. Think of what classical Reform Judaism looked like in the 1930s, and it was very different than Orthodox Judaism. It was, let's try and be more Catholic than the Pope, not realizing that he was going to be from Chicago eventually. But Chicago Sinai Congregation, for example, had services on Sundays, and it was high church reform, very intoxicated with God language, deeply committed to the Jewish social gospel, and the Jewish traditional religious components were seen as husks. Kaplan was responding in part to that, saying that Judaism endures not through a creed, not through a shared confession, but through a shared creativity in helping that evolution of Judaism. So there are different aspects of Judaism that are more compelling to some people than to others. Some are compelled by the ritual pieces, some by the ethical, some by the communal pieces, some by the memory, by history. All of these things are Jewish and are valid, and sometimes are not attractive to people. There are people who say, I don't connect with Jewish ritual, but I support Jewish causes. Is that Jewish? Sure. How about I don't like Jewish ritual? I don't believe in halakha, but I believe in making the world a better place, and I'm compelled by Jewish values of tikkun olam. Is that Jewish? Yes. Are those two people going to be able to have things in common? Maybe. Maybe if they live in the same condo. But more on that in a little bit. Kaplan was responding in the 1930s to American assimilation and the risk that if Judaism is just a religion, then Jews can opt out of it. If we're in the 1950s, Will Herberg wrote a book, Protestant, Catholic, and Jew, which to some people, they hear Protestant, Catholic, and Jew, and it just doesn't make sense. It's like saying monkey, book, and airplane. There are three things that you would never make in the New York Times connections. There's Protestant, Catholic, and Jew. Protestant and Catholic are religions. Judaism, according to my teacher, Abraham Infeld, he says Judaism is not a religion. But others disagreed. Oops, sorry, I jumped ahead. Now I want to look at reform's evolution. Kaplan spoke of an evolving an evolving religious civilization of the Jewish people. And Reform gives us a clear example of that evolution. 1885, the year that Temple Israel was founded, and I don't know, do you know, Rabbi Spitzer, were there representatives from Canton at the Pittsburgh platform?
I don't think so.
So in 1885, the newly organized rabbinical group in the United States. It predates the founding of the Central Conference of American Rabbis by 4 years. But in 1885, there were enough Reform rabbis in the United States to get together in Pittsburgh and created what has become known as the Pittsburgh Platform, the ideological foundation of classical Reform Judaism. And this is what it says in part. We recognize in the modern era of universal culture of heart and intellect the approaching of the realization of Israel's great messianic hope for the establishment of the kingdom of truth, justice, and peace among all men. We consider ourselves no longer a nation, but a religious community, and therefore expect neither a return to Palestine nor a sacrificial worship under the sons of Aaron, nor the restoration of any of the laws concerning the Jewish state. 1885, before World War I, before the turn of the 20th century, it's responding to this is the assimilation that 50 years later would prompt Mordecai Kaplan to create Judaism as a civilization. This is an extreme, and it became out of date as soon as it was put in print. And what we tend to forget about these platforms of the Reform movement, which will be the same for the next three that I show you, is they represent a group of people who are a subset of the population, and more than that, they represent the people who were in the room and voted yes when it was on the ballot. In Columbus, for example, I heard stories that most of the rabbis were playing golf when the platform passed. But the Pittsburgh Platform is held up as the extreme Reform response to traditional Judaism. 1885, there's already starting to be an influx of Eastern European Jews. These are German Jews saying, peoplehood of religion. I want to be just like everybody else. I want to be a shopkeeper and work during the week and keep my store open on Saturday and close it on Sunday, just like everybody else, in keeping with the blue laws. They go to their church on Sunday morning. I go to my temple on Friday night, and we're all at work on Saturday. And furthermore, don't ever accuse me of being a disloyal American, because I'm not one of those Zionists who believes that there should be an upbuilding of a Jewish state before the Messiah comes. No, I believe in the Messiah. I believe that the Messiah is something that we're actively bringing through the brotherhood of men and the approaching realization of Israel's great messianic hope for the establishment of a kingdom of truth, justice, and peace among all men. That was 140 years ago, and we're still waiting. I don't know that John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie and J.P. Morgan were, I don't know that they were messianists in this way, but they certainly would have preached the prosperity gospel. But this is messianism at the turn of the 20th century, and it didn't last. And what we find is that those who hold on to that classical Reform or held on to it for 80 or 90 years were holding on to something that it wasn't as compelling as it had originally been. So it evolves. Reorientation. 52 years later, in 1937, Reform rabbis say, Judaism is the soul of which Israel is the body. Living in all parts of the world, Israel, now here Israel not as a state, but Israel as the people, has been held together by the ties of a common history and above all, by the heritage of faith. In the rehabilitation of Palestine, the land hallowed by memories and hopes, we behold the promise of renewed life for many of our brethren. We affirm the obligation of all Jewry to aid in its upbuilding as a Jewish homeland, by endeavoring to make it not only a haven of refuge for the oppressed, but also a center of Jewish culture and spiritual life. It doesn't mention political Zionism, but 1937, Hitler has already been in power for 4 years, and for many, the writing is on the wall. We've already had several waves of aliyot, of Jewish migration to British Mandatory Palestine. This is after World War I, and by this point, Jewish migration from Eastern Europe to the United States has all but ended. It ended in 1921, but here we have real life Jewish refugees moving to British Mandatory Palestine, and American Jews in Reform congregations who are Eastern European by birth, including the rabbi who wrote this, Samuel Cohen, who said, no, Jewish aspirations for peoplehood, that's legitimate. And a nation has a country. And if the Germans can have Germany, which was created in the 1840s, and the Italians can have Italy, which was created in the 19th century, and the Poles can have Poland, and the Czechs can have Czechoslovakia, the Jews should have a land of our own as well. And where better to go than back to the land of Israel, which at this point is not called Israel, it's called British Mandatory Palestine. But David Ben-Gurion, in declaring the state, didn't just pull the name Israel out of a hat. He could have picked something else. Could have picked Judea, but that sounded too Jewish. I'm not kidding. I know you think. 1976, after the Holocaust, after the Six-Day War, after the creation of the State of Israel. This is the work of Rabbi Eugene B. Borowitz, who was from Columbus. The Jewish people and Judaism defy precise definition because both are in the process of becoming. Jews by birth or conversion constitute an uncommon union of faith and peoplehood. Born as Hebrews in the ancient Near East, we are bound together like all ethnic groups by language, land, history, culture, and institutions. But the people of Israel is unique because of its involvement with God and its resulting perception of the human condition. Throughout our long history, our people has been inseparable from its religion with its messianic hope that humanity will be redeemed. This is already 49 years ago, but I think it holds true today, that Judaism is at once a people and a religion. And the Jewish religion is the religious expression of the Jewish people that is part ancient covenant and part ongoing revelation. It is evolving. But this wasn't enough because the Central Conference of American Rabbis had to do it again in 1999. And this was a sore point for this was the year that I graduated rabbinical school. And my classmates and I would do anything to pick a fight. And the conference at which this was voted on, and it happened to be in Pittsburgh. Were you there, Rabbi Spitzer? And you weren't there? You could already smell retirement 9 years away. You said, I'm not going all the way to Pittsburgh. 1999, the conference at which this was voted on was held in between the New York ordination and the Cincinnati ordination from Hebrew Union College. So it was in June, I believe. So my colleagues who were ordained in New York were allowed to go vote on that, and Cincinnati hadn't happened yet. The ordination hadn't happened. So the 22 of us in my class said, well, we just don't count. But I probably would have voted for this. This is the work of Rabbi Richard Levy. Throughout our history, we Jews have remained firmly rooted in Jewish tradition, even as we have learned much from our encounters with other cultures. The great contribution of Reform Judaism is that it has enabled the Jewish people to introduce innovation while preserving tradition, to embrace diversity while asserting commonality, to affirm beliefs without rejecting those who doubt, and to bring faith to sacred texts without sacrificing critical scholarship. What Rabbi Richard Levy of blessed memory was doing here was formalizing Jewish dilemmas. That to be a religious people, that is to be religious persons who are part of a people, and means we can be part of multiple peoples. We can be part of the Jewish people. We can be people of Stark County. We can be Ohioans. We can be Americans. We can be all of these different things. And being Jewish often means being being on the fence between two worlds, to be universal or particular, to be sure in our faith but also express doubt, to have a religious confession that we might not believe, but we sacrifice our own doubts for the sake of communal unity. Reform has changed dramatically over the course of the last 200 years, but we're still here. We're still answering the same basic question: is how can we have both tradition and modernity at the same time? And for us, this question has to do with, are we a religion or are we a people? Peoplehood is now integral. Belonging to the Jewish people is on par with religious affiliation. It embraces ancestry, culture, choice, and the global Jewish community. Meaning, we can be part of a people that we never meet. We can feel part of a global Jewish peoplehood when we're geographically distant from other Jews. The most developed formulation of belonging is that Judaism is a people and a civilization, not only a religion. Over time, Reform Judaism's articulation of belonging has moved from being only a religion to being a religion and a people, to being a people and a religion, to being a culture. And to be a culture and be part of a peoplehood for us today means having a shared history, a shared destiny, shared pretty diverse culture, being part of a global Jewish community of religious choice. And this is especially visible in contemporary Reform articulations. So last time I mentioned Rabbi Angela Wernick Buchdahl, who is the senior rabbi of Central Synagogue. And Ronit, my wife works for Hillel International, and Ronit told me that this last week there was a gathering at Princeton Hillel of Jewish Asian students. And Ronit said, how many people do you think came? I said, I don't know, 100? Take a guess how many people came. 450 students from across North America who are Jewish and Asian. Now, for people who think Jews are all Ashkenazi, white, middle-class Jews, no. There's diversity within the Jewish community, and Angela Wernick Buchdahl was the keynote speaker at this program at Yale. That's Jewish peoplehood. That the kinds of things that Ashkenazi Jews, by birth or by choice, that the things that we take for granted, we who are Ashkenazi, as part of Jewish culture. Like when I get my version of pornography is the Zabar's catalog. The Zabar's catalog came this week, and I just drool over it. I have told Ronit multiple times, if I'm on death row, I want there's a Fresser's package. It's $369. I could spend my last $369 and mail that to me at prison. That's, to me, that's Ashkenazi beauty. But what do I know if I'm not an Asian Jew? The blending of these cultures speaks deeply to these, and meaningfully to these 450 students who had plenty of other things to do, but at this moment in time, they felt compelled to be with a people. Not just with Jewish people, but with fellow people who are Jewish and Asian. And probably get discrimination from both sides. Now let's look at some contemporary data. Every few years, every 10 years, the Pew Research Center does a study of American Jews. And this is more scientific than how we do research in the Jewish community. Was like, do you know somebody who's Jewish? You know somebody who's Jewish? Did you see the Jewish person over here? Oh, how many is that? It's 100 Jews. Oh, we got 100 Jews. Now this is the demographic stuff. The Pew study in 2020, called coincidentally Jewish Americans in 2020, asked a whole bunch of questions, and this research is used to determine by funding networks and philanthropists and by organizations to figure out what do we have to do better. It was a study like this in 2000 that launched Birthright Israel. It was a study like this that in 2010 that led to dramatic changes in how Jewish day schools operate. So in 2020, the most recent study, 72% of the Jews who responded said that being Jewish is mainly about ancestry and culture. 22% say it's mainly about religion. So is Judaism a religion? Is Judaism culture? Yes. Because mainly, doesn't say only, mainly about ancestry and culture. So what does this mean? If you're going to get 450 college students, do you make it about religion? No. You make it about ancestry and culture. If you want to connect with people who come from a wide variety of backgrounds, you focus on the things that are meaningful to them, as opposed to the traditional things that have always worked. Because somebody who grew up in a Reformed congregation that was adhering to the Pittsburgh platform, that may be relevant to them in part, but it's not relevant to people who may have no meaningful connection to Reformed Judaism as it used to be. And that includes me. I love the organ music. Give me a Lewandowski tune, and I'm happy as a clam, and would probably eat one too. But it's just not compelling to people. So the old assumptions, and this is why Pew is important for peoplehood and religion, this has an impact on congregations like ours, is if we just do things the way that we always do them, we're going to do ourselves right out of meaning and existence. And that's a tender, delicate balance, because we have to at once meet the religious needs and the cultural needs and the ethical needs and the civilizational needs. Identity is expressed through participation and values more than it is expressed through belief. If you come here to a Shabbat service, you would be shocked to know that there are about 250 families that are members of this congregation. Because there are not 250 families there on a Friday night. There are not 250 families there on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But does that mean we're failing? No. That means that the religious component is not the most compelling component to people. We get more people volunteering at the food bank than we do at a typical Torah study. So we could sit back and go, oh, what happened to the good old days? Or we just keep moving forward. I'm looking forward to 2030 to see what the next Pew study says. So here's our synthesis. We are a religion, an ethnicity, a culture, and a peoplehood. The Jewish dilemma, the answer is yes. We are all of these things, and we should never lose focus on any of them. A synagogue that ceases to offer the religious components isn't fulfilling its mission. Anybody familiar with the Society for Ethical Culture?
Felix Adler, late 19th century.
Felix Adler, late 19th century. You know who Felix Adler's father was? Felix Adler's father was a Reform rabbi. So Felix Adler, the creator or the founder of the Society for Ethical Culture, which still has a beautiful building on I think it's on Central Park West. The Society for Ethical Culture positioned itself between secular humanism and Reform Judaism. And it was the response of the child of a Reform rabbi. I think Adler's father was the rabbi, I believe it was Temple Emmanuel in New York. I could be wrong about that. But that's trying to get to the ethical components and the cultural components and taking out the religious piece, which meets some people's needs, but not everybody's. So what is it that compels people to be part of a Jewish community today? They want to be part of a people, and many want the religious components, even if they don't use them. They want to know that they're there when they need it. They want to know that there's going to be a minyan there when they have to say Kaddish. They want to know there's going to be a rabbi there when it's time for a life cycle event. And that's fine. You can look at it sometimes like the Red Cross. Why do we, or the fire department? Does the fire department do bake sales and fundraisers? No, it's just part of paying taxes is that you expect that when there's a fire at your house, the fire department is going to come. Well, does the fire department just appear like Brigadoon? No, the only way that they're able to deploy to be able to get to the house that's on fire is because they're there all the time. The way that a religious community, a cultural community, a civilization is able to deploy to meet the needs of its people is by being there all the time. In order to be a religion, an ethnicity, a culture, and a people, we have to be all of those things simultaneously. And this may shock you, but sometimes people are dissatisfied. So the religious component is based in covenant. And the religious component, I would say broadly, prayer, Torah study, observing the mitzvot, the ritual stuff, Shabbat, life cycles. The ethnic component is this shared ancestry by birth or by choice, this shared communal memory, and includes the Hebrew language. That the ethnic component of Judaism, Hebrew is the common denominator. They're more so today than Yiddish or Ladino or other things. That Hebrew, being able to speak and understand Hebrew, connects Jews all over the world. Being able to read it or decode it also connects Jews, because you can go to any, if you know the prayers, you can go to any synagogue anywhere in the world and follow along. You may not be able to follow along in the vernacular, but the Hebrew is the same, even if there's differences in pronunciation. The cultural component is the music, the humor, the food, the language. All of this is creative, and there's a difference. I point this out in my writing. There's a difference between culture and ethnicity and nostalgia. So, Rabbi Lawrence Hoffman has written about the difference between a group of people sitting around a delicatessen in New York reminiscing about the good old days. That's not Jewish culture. That's nostalgia. The Jewish cultural piece is getting a group of people who are a combination of Jews by birth and Jews by choice together, learning how to make matzo ball soup, which is also an Ashkenazi delicacy, just like the corned beef sandwiches, but it's about looking forward rather than looking backward. It's about making this soup so that you can create new memories and learn some kind of hands-on skill and create new memories that you can pass on to other people, versus just sitting back. And there's nothing wrong with sitting back and eating a corned beef sandwich, but we shouldn't confuse that with going to synagogue. And peoplehood is a sense of collective destiny and responsibility. And I think that looking at Judaism only as a religion misses this critical piece. It is the tie to Jewish peoplehood that compels people, that compels Jews to shudder anytime there is somebody with a distinctively Jewish name who does something bad. The most reviled person in the United States today, unfortunately, he's dead, but he has a Jewish name, with the Files. Why couldn't his family have changed their name? Why couldn't they be the Ellis family? They had to stick with Epstein. At least they didn't pronounce it Epstein. That would be even worse. Jeffrey Epis Essen. Yeah. Jeffrey Yamach Shemo. It's, when you see who is this, the son of Sam? Like, it had to be named David Berkowitz. David Burke. You could. It's that visceral reaction. It's one of us, which is just crazy because it's not collective responsibility, but we feel like it's a Landsman, and it's the same thing that gives us great pride. Every time I hear, Jonas Salk and Albert Sabin, they were both Jewish. The polio was cured by Jews, and the world has loved us ever since. Okay, we can take great pride in things that Jewish do, and we suffer great indignity when Jews do horrendous things. That's Jewish peoplehood. When you travel anywhere and look for synagogues, look for Jews, look for Jewish sites, that is Jewish peoplehood. The first thing, if you check the newspaper every morning and look for something about Jews, good, bad, or otherwise, rarely good or otherwise, that's Jewish peoplehood, is this sense of connection with people that we don't even know. That's family. You can't see the picture close up, but this is this is from the website of the Union for Reform Judaism. It's a diverse picture of what Jews look like, because I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding amongst the wider population about who Jews are. Are we a nation? Are we a people? Are we a religion? Yes, but we don't fit neatly into any one of those categories. So yesterday, Rabbi Spitzer and I had lunch with a religious leader, and this was the point that we were just. But you can probably describe it better than I can, Rabbi Spitzer. What was at the heart of what we were getting at?
I'm trying to, if I remember, we were trying to discuss the difficulties of balancing these varieties of identity. Not sure where we're going with that.
Well, this particular it was Bishop John Michael Botein,
Right.
who is the bishop of the Romanian Catholic Church in America. He happens to the see is here. It's in Canton, but he's part of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, and he's Romanian, but he's American, and he's Catholic, but he's Cantonian, and he's a bishop, but he's also a priest. So, what's the nationality? Romanian. What's the religion? Catholic. What's the ethnicity? Romanian. What's the citizenship? American. That's complex. Judaism is all of those things. And when we say, but my nation is the United States, yeah, that's also part of our culture. Just like Golda Meir was culturally American, but she was the prime minister of Israel, and she smoked like a chimney, so you know she was Israeli. And she lived before and died before there were cell phones, but they say God gave us two hands, one for the Torah and one for Rashi's commentary. God gives Israelis two hands so that they can have the cell phone and the cigarette, and don't mix them up. To be at once all a part of all of these different cultures and ethnicities is complex, and that is part of the difficulty of explaining to people what is Judaism. So the New York mayor's race is hinging on people's perceptions of one particular candidate who has said that doesn't think that a religion should have a country. Now, this is in part why Abraham Infeld says Judaism is not a religion, because there are plenty of countries that have official religions. Most countries have a state religion. The United States does not, and you know what? Neither does Israel. Israel has religious officials from different religions, but Judaism in Israel is not the state religion. It is the state. It is the state of the Jews. So Theodor Herzl, the father of political Zionism. Theodor Herzl wrote a book in German. He wrote several, but one of them is called the State of the Jews, der Judenstaat, which is different than Jüdische Staat, the Jewish state. We miss the difference in English, but the state of the Jews, as opposed to a Jewish state. In the eyes of political Zionism, it is not Jewish religion that entitles Jews to a state. It is Jewish peoplehood, just as there are German people who have a German country and Brazilian people who have a Brazilian country. There are Jewish people. And what's the Jewish country? Israel. The place where all of that, remember that thing back in Genesis 12? To the land that I will show you. What was that land? Pittsburgh? No. Genesis 12, the land that I will show you is the land of Israel, which opens up a whole other can of unkosher worms. So we're going to look at next time is survival and ethics. Because we live at this exceptional moment in Jewish history where there are Jews with power, where there is a Jewish army, or an army that is majority Jewish. And that is the exceptional moment in history. So when we're going to look at this dilemma between survival and ethics is at what cost does the survival of the Jewish people come? At what ethical cost does that survival come? And what is and what are the competing values of staying alive and maintaining your integrity? So what, put simply, what is a Jewish state, a state of the Jews, supposed to look like? And with the caveat that we're safely here in the United States of America, and in a relatively good neighborhood surrounded by Mexico and Canada, and Israel is not. But why do we care about this? We're not, anybody in here an Israeli citizen? Why do we care about this?
Because it affects all of us.
We're Jews. That's peoplehood. Is it the religious component of it? No. Is it the cultural? No. Is it the ethnic? No. It's the peoplehood. It is the very deep connection of being part of a global family that that compels us to wrestle with these complex issues. I'm going to turn that off so you don't have to look at me. Comments or questions?
You know, I'm gonna have a question and a comment.
Go for it.
I guess the question is for me is relatively simple, and that is, to what end, for what purpose? The Judaism as civilization, culture, peoplehood, and so on describe belonging. It's comfortable, it's tasty, at times it's reasonable for argument, but to what purpose? It's sort of, you know, my question, I guess, revolves around the difference between a mission statement and a vision statement. And I always try to find, and I think you do too, you know, why is it that we have these study sessions and services and social action projects and so on? To what purpose? Can you articulate an answer?
Sure. There must be a reason why there are still Jews. For 4,000 years, people have been trying to get rid of us, and it hasn't worked.
Hasn't worked very well.
No. And on the one hand, you can give the religious answer from Torah, which is that we're destined to be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand on the shore of the sea, but not at one time. Meaning we are eternal. But I think a practical response is that our mission as Jews is not to make the whole world Jewish. Our mission as Jews is quite the opposite. It is to live this covenant with the mission to leave the world better than we found it, and not just for ourselves. If we just do things for ourselves, okay, that's all right. We just do things for the Jewish people. But Jonas Salk and Albert Sabin didn't just develop polio vaccines for Jews. In fact, Jonas Salk wouldn't take any money for it. That you're going to leave the world better than you found it. That's cannot be done on your own. Judaism is meant to be done communally and collectively, and that as the covenant was accepted communally and collectively, life has to be lived out that way, so that our vision is still of this messianic ideal of peace on earth and brotherhood of all human and sisterhood of all humanity. How we get there is by living in covenant. And the survival and the ethics comes in where we have to weigh competing values. Bless you. So I'm going to give you some real life scenarios for us to consider next week. So it's not just going to be all theoretical. We're going to have to discuss and come up with resolutions to complex problems.
I would urge people to take a look at the mission statement for Temple Israel, which has evolved. Because I think it makes pretty clear that there's a reason why we teach what we teach and do what we do. In Genesis, I think it's Abraham is told that to do righteousness and justice. That's what we're for.
Yes.
And I think that keys right into what you said.
Very good. Thank you, Rabbi Spitzer. Other comments or questions?
Well, I just kind of think that something else that makes us Jewish, eating gefilte fish and matzah pizza.
Gefilte fish and matzah pizza, not in the same bite.
Not in the same place. Yeah, two different meals.
Yeah, so those are some of the ethnic components of Judaism. Yeah, yeah, it's that shared memory, which is more than nostalgia, because it passes down traditions, and so much of Jewish life is centered around food, and we're not the first generation to deal with that. After all, what was going on in the tabernacle and then the temple in Jerusalem? What was that altar? It was a barbecue pit. It was the kitchen counter. And in place of sacrifice today, we have altars. Our dining room tables are the altars where we gather around, and we don't have the priesthood anymore. Everybody is involved. We have become a kingdom of priests because everybody is involved in the preparation of the food and the cleanup and so forth. And that's how, for people who observe the ritual laws of kashrut, it elevates a very animal instinct to eat and elevates it into being more conscientious about what we're putting into our bodies. Now, that doesn't mean it's all healthy, because if you need help finding unkosher healthy food, I'm your guy. But being mindful of those things, though Jewish dietary stuff is intended to bring Jews together. Unfortunately, what it does in practice is it drives us apart, because everybody makes their own hechsher and say, well, no, her food isn't kosher enough for me. There's 3 Jews on the block, but hers isn't kosher enough for me. All right, next time we're going to look at survival and ethics. Between now and then, we're going to have a Shabbat. We have a bat mitzvah this weekend, so if you're into sacrificing children, this is not the time. But you get to Friday night, Saturday, we celebrate with a lovely